My parents labeled me a college dropout and failure and disowned me. 5 years later, I met them again at my brother's graduation party. His professor asked, "Do you know him?" I replied, "You don't know him at all." They had absolutely no idea who I was until, that future exchange replayed in my mind as I sat in my idling car. The cream cardstock invitation felt like a weapon in my hand. I watched the valet line, feeling the engine's vibration hum through the seat. I wasn't the 22-year-old boy who left home with a garbage bag of clothes anymore. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The Italian wool suit fit perfectly across my shoulders, serving as armor against the memories waiting inside. My watch, a sleek chronograph bought after my first major contract, ticked steadily against my pulse. It was a tangible reminder of everything I had built from the ashes they left behind. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the performance. Stepping onto the pavement, the humid Nashville air instantly clung to my skin. The venue was a sprawling estate, illuminated by golden uplights that made the limestone facade glow. Lauder drifted from the open doors, a sound that used to make my stomach churn with anxiety. Tonight, however, it just sounded like noise. I handed my keys to the valet, who didn't blink at the luxury sedan. He treated me with deference, a respect my father had never once shown me. I approached the entrance where a security guard held a clipboard with the guest list. I prepared to give my name, ready for the confusion or the rejection that might follow. But the man simply looked at my shoes, then my face, and stepped aside. He unhooked the velvet rope without asking a single question. He assumed I belonged there. It was a bitter realization that confidence and tailoring were better keys than bloodlines. I walked past him, stepping over the threshold. The interior smelled of expensive lilies and old money, a scent that hit me like a physical blow. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting fracture light over the crowd. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved like ghosts through the throng of guests. I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting to the brilliance. Every corner of this place was designed to intimidate, to remind you of your station. I tightened my grip on my phone, my only lifeline to the real world. Then I saw them. My parents stood near the center of the ballroom, holding court like royalty. My father looked older, his hair thinner, but his posture remained rigid, with arrogance. Beside him, my mother laughed at something a guest said, her hand resting possessively on my brother's arm. Julian looked the part of the golden child, soaking in the adoration. They looked like a perfect painting. I stood at the edge of the light, a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. I navigated the perimeter of the ballroom, moving like smoke against the dark paneled walls. The noise of the party swelled around me, a cacophony of crystal clinking against teeth and polite, hollow laughter. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray, just to have something to hold. My knuckles turned white against the stem. No one looked at me twice. To them, I was just another suit, another donor, another background extra in the grand production of the Harrington family success story. My parents were flanked by admirers near the ice sculpture, beaming with practiced radiance. My mother wore pearls I remembered my father giving her after a particularly bad argument years ago. Julian stood between them, shaking hands with the robotic precision of a politician. He looked polished, successful, and utterly hollow. It was strange to see the brother I used to protect, now wearing the crown. He laughed at a joke, throwing his head back, but his eyes remained scanning the room, cold and calculating. I drifted closer, staying just outside their direct line of sight. A heavy-set man in a tuxedo clapped my father on the shoulder, his voice booming over the string quartet. And what about the older boy? Adam. Wasn't it? My breath hitched in my throat. My father didn't even flinch. He swirled his scotch and smiled with easy charm. Oh, Adam is doing marvelously. He's heading up our new logistics branch in Tokyo. We barely see him, unfortunately. He's a total workaholic. The lie was so smooth it almost sounded like the truth. Tokyo, logistics, workaholic. He had invented an entire life for me. One that sounded impressive enough to brag about, but distant enough to explain my absence. Rage flared hot and sharp in my chest, threatening to burn through my composure. They hadn't just disowned me, they had rewritten my existence to serve their ego. I took a sip of water, forcing the cool liquid to temper the fire. They were protecting their brand. Excuse me, young man. A familiar voice startled me. I turned to see Mrs. Gable, my mother's best friend, and a woman who had known me since I was 5. She peered at me through thick glasses, a pleasant smile on her face. Panic spiked in my gut. I wasn't ready to be outed yet. That is a lovely watch, she said, pointing to my wrist. My husband has been looking for one just like it. Do you have the time? She didn't know me. It's 8:15, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. She thanked me and patted my arm, her touch casual and dismissive, before wandering off toward the buffet. I stood frozen in her wake. She had looked directly into my eyes and seen a stranger. I wasn't Adam, the boy who used to mow her lawn. I was just a wealthy stranger checking the time. It was the ultimate insulation. 5 years of silence had effectively scrubbed my face from their collective memory. I turned back to the center of the room and caught Julian staring in my direction. For a heartbeat, time stopped. I waited for the flash of recognition, the widening eyes, the panic, but his gaze slid over me like water over a stone, dismissing me as irrelevant. He turned back to his admirers, raising his glass in a toast to himself. He saw neither brother nor threat. They hadn't just erased me. They had replaced me with a convenient ghost who made them look good. I retreated to the mahogany bar, needing distance from the Tokyo fabrication my father had spun. The bartender poured a scotch without asking, judging my mood correctly from the set of my jaw. I stared into the amber liquid, watching the bubbles rise and vanish. It was a perfect metaphor for my standing here tonight. I was successful, wealthy, and completely non-existent in the eyes of my own blood. I took a sip, the burn grounding me. Then, a hand settled nearby. A tweed jacket sleeve, frayed slightly at the cuff, caught my eye. I would know that brooding expression anywhere. A gravelly voice said. I turned slowly, bracing for another case of mistaken identity or awkward dismissal. But the eyes behind the wire, rimmed spectacles were sharp and knowing. It was Dr. Harrison, the only professor who had fought for me when my grades slipped during the Depression. He looked older, his hair completely white, but his kindness remained unchanged. He saw me. Harrison smiled, ignoring the festive noise swelling around us. Adam Harrington. It has been 5 years, hasn't it? The faculty lounge still talks about your final portfolio. The validation hit me harder than the alcohol ever could. While my parents called me a failure, this man remembered my work as legendary. I heard you left, he continued softly, studying my face. I always wondered where a talent like that went. Please tell me you didn't stop creating. The world has enough accountants. I pulled a heavy business card from my pocket and slid it across the polished bar. It was matte black with silver embossing apex design. Harrison picked it up, his eyebrows shooting toward his hairline. You are Apex? He asked. genuine shock coloring his tone. I just assigned your rebrand of the Metro Tech Center as a case study for my seniors. He looked from the card to me, connecting the dots. You built this. From nothing? That is extraordinary. Before I could thank him, a tall, imposing man in a charcoal suit joined us. Harrison, stop monopolizing the scotch, he joked, his voice booming. This was Dean Reynolds, the head of the medical school Julian had just graduated from. Harrison gestured to me immediately. Dean, you have to meet the genius behind Apex Design. This is the man we've been trying to get a meeting with for the hospital rebranding project. Reynolds turned to me, his interest instantly piqued. Reynolds extended a manicured hand. A pleasure. We have been admiring your work from afar. Our current branding is archaic. I shook his hand, feeling the strange duality of the moment. I was securing a massive contract at a party celebrating the brother who stole my inheritance. We specialize in modernizing legacy institutions, I said, keeping my voice professional. I would be happy to discuss the details. Reynolds nodded enthusiastically. We need fresh eyes. Someone who understands how to build a legacy. You know, Reynolds said, leaning in conspiratorially. You really should talk to the host, Mr. Harrington. He is a major donor and sits on our board. He has been pushing for his son's friend to get this contract. But I prefer your vision. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. My father was actively blocking me without even knowing it was me. I believe I know him, I said carefully. Reynolds laughed. Good. Because in this town, names are everything. I realized that in this room, my name carried weight. Just not the name my parents gave me. 30 minutes later, the air in the ballroom felt suffocatingly thin. I leaned against a marble pillar, watching the performance unfold. Julian had stopped smiling. His eyes darted toward his phone every few seconds. A tick I recognized from our childhood whenever he was hiding something. He whispered to our mother, then slipped away from the main crowd, heading toward the quieter corridor leading to the private suites. It wasn't a bathroom break. It was a tactical retreat. I set my glass down and followed. The hallway was dimly lit and lined with plush velvet benches that absorbed sound. I moved silently on the thick carpet, keeping my distance. Julian stopped near a service alcove, checking over his shoulder. I ducked behind a large potted fern, feeling ridiculous yet focused. He dialed a number, and seconds later, I heard my mother's voice echo from the ballroom entrance down the hall. They were communicating from 50 feet apart to avoid being overheard. The secrecy was a siren. I know, Mom, stop worrying, Julian hissed into the phone, his voice veering slightly off the silk wallpaper. The lawyer said the paperwork is ready. We just need to sign the affidavit tonight. I held my breath, pressing my back against the cold wainscoting. Affidavit? My grandmother's trust fund was the only legal matter that required such urgency. It was supposed to unlock upon the youngest grandchild's graduation. That was tonight. My heart hammered against my ribs, anticipating the blow. Julian paced in tight circles, his shadow stretching long across the floor. He isn't here, is he? He's gone. That counts as abandonment. He listened for a moment, then laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. Mom, he dropped out. He quit life. Why should he get half? My practice needs the capital for the buy-in. Adam is probably flipping burgers somewhere. He doesn't need $1 million. He wouldn't know what to do with it. I couldn't hear my mother's exact words, but I heard Julian's response loud and clear. Exactly. We're doing him a favor. If he had the money, he'd just waste it on therapy or drugs. The casual malice stole the air from my lungs. They weren't just disappointed in me, they viewed me as a liability to be liquidated. They had justified theft as moral stewardship. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the erasure. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling with a mix of adrenaline and rage. I swiped to the voice memo app and hit the red button. I angled the microphone toward the alcove, praying the ambient noise wouldn't drown him out. Julian continued, unaware of the digital witness. Just tell Dad to keep the speech focused on me. If anyone asks about Adam, stick to the Tokyo story. Dead men don't claim inheritances. The recording bar pulsed, capturing every syllable. I stopped the recording and saved the file as the truth. Julian hung up and straightened his tie in a hallway mirror, practicing his winning smile. He looked like a prince, but I now carried the proof that he was a thief. I waited until he returned to the party before stepping out from the shadows. The grief I had carried for 5 years evaporated, replaced by cold calculation. It wasn't just about reputation anymore. It was grand larceny disguised as family business. I slipped out the side doors onto the limestone terrace, needing to put physical walls between myself and the toxicity inside. The night air was heavy with jasmine, cloying, and thick against my throat. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my thumbs flying across the glass with military precision. I typed a message to Leo, my business partner and closest friend. Code red. Family is fraudulent. Bring the portfolio and the lawyer. I hit send and watched the delivery bubble turn blue. The war had officially begun. Leaning against the stone balustrade, I stared out at the Nashville skyline. The distant lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, shimmering like a mirage. For a moment, the old fear clawed at my throat. The insidious voice that said, I was just a pretender in a rented suit. But the phone vibrated against my palm, anchoring me to reality. Leo's reply was a single thumbs up emoji followed by ETA 10 minutes. He was already en route. I straightened my tie, checking my reflection in the dark glass. I turned to go back inside, but the door opened before I could reach it. A man in a velvet tuxedo stepped out, trailing a cloud of acrid cigar smoke. It was Mr. Sterling, one of my father's oldest golf buddies. He squinted at me, his eyes glassy with too much champagne. Adam, is that you? He slurred slightly. Your dad said you were in Japan. Did you fly in just for this? That is some serious dedication, son. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. I resisted the urge to shrug off his hand, knowing the sword on his palm would stain the wool. If I caused a scene now, I would lose the element of surprise. It was a last-minute trip. Mr. Sterling, I said, forcing a tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. I wanted to surprise the family. Sterling chuckled, oblivious to the razor's edge in my voice. Well, you certainly look prosperous. Japan must be treating you right. He patted my cheek before stumbling back toward the bar. 10 minutes later, a matte black SUV pulled up to the valet stand with aggressive speed. The driver's side door opened, and Leo stepped out. He wasn't wearing his usual casual streetwear. He was in a bespoke navy suit that screamed power. Beside him emerged Marcus, our corporate attorney, clutching a leather briefcase like a weapon. They looked like a hit squad disguised as venture capitalists. I walked down the steps to meet them, feeling my pulse synchronize with the rhythmic click of their dress shoes on the pavement. You look like you've seen a ghost, Leo said, scanning my face as he handed the keys to the stunned valet. Worse, I replied grimly. I saw a thief. I quickly briefed them on the recording and the trust fund plot as we walked toward the entrance. Marcus nodded, his expression shifting from professional to predatory. Fraud requires intent, Marcus said calmly, adjusting his cuffs. And you have them on tape admitting it. This is going to be a very short legal battle. We paused at the double doors, the sound of applause filtering through the wood. Leo grabbed my arm, stopping me. Before we go in there and burn it down, you should know something, he said, pulling up an email on his tablet. The Horizon contract signed an hour ago. We are officially servicing the entire fortune. 500 list. I stared at the numbers. The deposit alone was more than my parents' entire net worth. Let's go inside, Leo said, checking his watch. I believe your father is about to give a speech. We pushed through the heavy oak doors just as the string quartet faded into silence. The room had shifted its focus to a small dais where my father stood, holding a microphone like a scepter. He tapped it twice, the thud echoing through the hush of the crowd. My mother and Julian stood beside him, arranging their faces into masks of humble gratitude. They looked perfect, bathed in the warm spotlight that hid every flaw. I moved to the edge of the dance floor, flanking the stage. Leo and Marcus stood silently behind me, a dark phalanx ready to advance. Thank you all for coming, my father began, his voice dripping with practiced warmth. Tonight is about legacy. As a father, nothing brings me more pride than watching my children succeed. He placed a hand on Julian's shoulder, squeezing it affectionately. Julian has worked tirelessly to become a doctor, and though our eldest, Adam, couldn't be here tonight, due to his demanding role in Tokyo, we celebrate his international success as well. The lie was delivered without a stutter. He was claiming my imaginary triumphs to bolster his own, standing while actively robbing me of my name. A polite ripple of applause moved through the room, validating the deception. My father raised his champagne flute high. To my sons, who have both carried the Harrington name to new heights. The glass caught the light, sparkling like the diamond on my mother's finger. That was the breaking point. I stepped out of the shadows, walking directly into the pool of light illuminating the stage. That is an interesting toast, Dad, I said, my voice projecting clearly over the sudden, confused silence. Considering, you haven't spoken to your eldest son in 5 years. My father froze, the glass tilting dangerously in his hand. My mother gasped. A sharp intake of air that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Guests turned, craning their necks to see who dared interrupt the patriarch. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes locked on the man who had called me worthless. And for the record, I continued, stepping closer until I was at the foot of the stage. I don't live in Tokyo. I live 3 miles from here. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Panic flickered in my father's eyes, followed instantly by anger. He lowered the microphone, trying to keep the exchange private, but his voice carried. Adam, you are making a scene. You are clearly unwell. He turned to the crowd with a pitying smile. Please forgive him. He has always struggled with stability. It was the old narrative, the weapon they used to dismiss my reality. I nodded to Leo. Show them the stability, I said. Leo raised his tablet, connecting to the venue's system, and casting the screen onto the large monitors meant for Julian's photos. The image of Julian in his cap and gown vanished, replaced instantly by the stark, monochromatic logo of Apex Design. A collective murmur went through the room as the Apex portfolio began to cycle. Images of the city's skyline, the new tech center, and the Fortune 500 contracts scrolled by. Finally, a bank statement header appeared, showing the company's valuation. I didn't go to Japan, I said, pointing to the screen. I stayed here and built the biggest design firm in the South. I didn't need your name to do it. The visual proof of my success hit them harder than any shout. My mother looked at the screen, then at me, her face pale with shock. But Julian wasn't looking at the screen, he was looking at his ruined night. He grabbed the microphone from our father. "This is pathetic," he sneered, his voice cracking with desperation. "You crash my party to show off some fake graphics. You are just jealous, Adam. You have always been jealous. You are a dropout and a liar who is trying to ruin my moment." "I might be a dropout," I said, my voice eerily calm against his hysteria. "But I am not a thief." I pulled my phone out and held it up. I didn't need the speakers. The room was deadly silent. I pressed play. Julian's voice, tinny but unmistakable, cut through the air. "He isn't here, is he? He's gone. That counts as abandonment. Adam is probably flipping burgers. Dead men don't claim inheritances." The recording looped the final phrase. The cruelty owing off the vaulted ceilings. The color drained from Julian's face, as if someone had pulled a plug. My mother covered her mouth with a trembling hand, staring at her golden child with horror. It wasn't the theft that horrified her. It was the public exposure of their greed. The guests were no longer whispering. They were staring in open judgment. The perfect family narrative had shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. I saw Mrs. Gable turn away from my mother in disgust. The social capital they hoarded, like gold, was evaporating in real time. Before my father could spin another lie, Dean Reynolds stepped forward from the crowd. He didn't look at my father. He looked at Julian with professional coldness. "Dr. Harrington," Reynolds said, using the title Julian had just earned. "Is that your voice discussing fraud regarding a family trust?" Julian stammered, unable to form words. Reynolds turned to me, nodding once in acknowledgement. "I believe we need to have a serious conversation about ethics before any residency begins." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. The kind of quiet that only comes when a monument crumbles. My father ushered us toward the service corridor, gripping Julian's elbow like a vice. The walk to the private conference room felt like a funeral procession. Guests parted for us, their whispers following like smoke. We entered the small, airless suite lined with unsmiling portraits. The door clicked shut, cutting off the crowd, but the tension inside was loud enough to scream. My mother collapsed onto a velvet settee, weeping, while my father turned on me with bared teeth. He looked like a cornered animal, dangerous and totally desperate. Marcus didn't give him a chance to speak. He slammed his briefcase onto the mahogany table, the sound cracking like a whip. "Sit down," Marcus commanded. It wasn't a suggestion. My father blinked, stunned by the tone, but he sat. Julian hovered by the door, pale and sweating, looking physically ill. Leo stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the room. I took the chair at the head of the table. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the child in the principal's office. I was the judge. "This is a misunderstanding," my father started, his voice trembling with rage. "Adam, we were protecting you. We knew you couldn't handle the pressure of that money." The gaslighting was so instinctive it was almost impressive. He actually believed his own lie. "Protecting me?" I asked, leaning forward. "By declaring me abandoned. By erasing me from the family tree." I looked at him with absolute zero emotion. "You weren't protecting me. You were robbing me to fund Julian's vanity project. Do not insult my intelligence with your delusions." Marcus slid a thick stack of documents across the table. "Here are your options," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Option A, You sign this affidavit acknowledging Adam's full claim to the trust immediately. Option B. Z. We hand the recording to the district attorney tomorrow morning. Marcus paused, letting the threat hang in the air. Conspiracy to commit fraud is a felony. It carries a prison sentence, and Julian will lose his medical license before he even starts. The room went dead silent. My mother looked up, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. Adam, please. We're your family. You wouldn't send your brother to jail. Her touch felt cold and clammy. I pulled my hand away as if she were contagious. You didn't act like family when I was sleeping in my car, I said. You didn't act like family when you called me a failure. She flinched, realizing her tears had no currency here. You disowned the son you had. I continued, my voice steady. You threw him away because he wasn't perfect enough for your country club friends. You have no claim on the man I became. I stood up, towering over them. I built my life in spite of you, not because of you. I pointed to the papers. Sign them. Now. Or I walk out that door and let the police handle the rest. I wasn't asking for permission. I was giving orders. The power had flipped. Julian was the first to break. He looked at Dean Reynolds' empty chair in his mind's eye, terrified of losing everything he had worked for. Dad. Just sign it, he whispered, his voice cracking. They have the recording. Reynolds heard it. We can't fight this. My father looked at his golden child, seeing the fear and the weakness. The facade of the strong patriarch crumbled. He realized he couldn't charm or bully his way out of this one. The game was over, and he had lost. My father picked up the heavy fountain pen. His hand shook, a tremor of rage and humiliation. He scratched his signature onto the line, pressing so hard the nib nearly tore the paper. He shoved the papers toward my mother. She signed quickly, sobbing quietly, refusing to look at me. Then Julian signed, his face gray. Marcus snatched the documents up immediately, checking every signature for validity. He nodded to me, sliding the executed trust release into his briefcase. It was done. The theft was stopped. We turned to leave, but Julian's voice stopped me at the door. Adam, wait. I paused, hand on the brass knob. The buy, in for the practice, he said, his voice pathetic and small. I still need the capital. Could you loan me a portion? I can pay you back. I stared at him, genuinely amazed. Even now, facing ruin, he thought he was entitled to my help. He hadn't learned a thing. He was just a hollow man looking for a new host. I didn't say a word. I just laughed, a short, sharp sound that felt like clearing my throat of dust. I opened the door and walked out, Leo and Marcus flanking me. The music from the party had resumed, a jarringly cheerful soundtrack to the carnage we left behind. I heard my mother call my name one last time. A desperate wail, but I didn't look back. The sound of the heavy door clicking shut behind me was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The lobby seemed miles long as we walked toward the exit, the plush carpet muffling our heavy footsteps. My heart rate was finally slowing down, the adrenaline crash leaving me feeling lightheaded but strangely energized. Leo walked beside me, loosening his silk tie with a sharp, decisive tug. Marcus checked his watch, ever the professional, likely already billing me for the unexpected overtime hours. We pushed through the revolving doors into the cool night air. It tasted sweet, like rain and ozone. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that finally felt like it belonged to me. I have negotiated hostile takeovers, with less tension than that room, Leo said, breaking the silence with a wicked grin. The look on your father's face when the recording played. priceless. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. I leaned against a concrete pillar, watching the valet jog toward the parking lot to retrieve my car. He never thought I'd fight back, I said quietly. He thought I was still the scared kid who left 5 years ago. Leo shook his head, checking his cufflinks. Well, he definitely knows better now. You didn't just fight, Adam. You nuked the bridge. Marcus handed me a copy of the signed release form before heading to his own vehicle. I will file these first thing in the morning. Congratulations, Adam. I held the folder, feeling its negligible weight against the heavy significance of its contents. For years, I believed my success only counted if they acknowledged it. I thought their approval was the finish line. But standing there under the hotel awning, I realized the truth. I didn't need their love to be whole. I didn't need their apology to heal. I was complete on my own. My phone vibrated in my pocket, startling me. I pulled it out, half expecting a desperate text from my mother or a threat from Julian. Instead, the screen lit up with a message from Dean Reynolds. Unfortunate business tonight. However, talent speaks louder than drama. I want Apex on the hospital project. Call my office Monday. I showed the glowing screen to Leo. Looks like we got the contract, I said. On merit. Leo fist bumped me, a solid thud against my knuckles. Told you. We win. They lose. It was the final nail in their coffin. The valet pulled my car up to the curb, the engine purring softly in the quiet night. Before I got in, I opened my contacts list one last time. The names, Dad and Mom, sat there, relics of a life that no longer existed. My thumb hovered over the screen. There was no hesitation this time. No sentimental pause. I hit block contact on both numbers, then did the same for Julian. The confirmation pop-up disappeared, taking 5 years of guilt with it. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. It felt lighter. I slid into the driver's seat and gripped the leather wheel, the material cool under my palms. The interior was a sanctuary of silence and control. I checked the rearview mirror, seeing the illuminated venue shrinking in the distance. Somewhere inside, my family was likely trying to spin the disaster to the remaining guests, but their voices couldn't reach me anymore. I shifted gears and accelerated onto the main road, the city lights stretching out before me like a promise. I drove away into the dark, leaving the ghosts in the rearview mirror where they belonged.